Hello everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to the channel. I am here today with a graphic novel review, and this time I am talking about V-Wars Volume 1, Crimson Queen. This has a story written by Jonathan Maberry, and it has art drawn by Alan Robinson, Jay Photos, and Robbie Robbins. So this is, like I said, Volume 1 of a 2-volume set. This contains issues number, I keep saying issues numbers instead of just issue numbers, but you know what I mean. It contains issue numbers 1 through 5 in Volume 1, and then Volume 2 wraps up the story with, of course, it'd be issue 6 through number 11, and that would be the entirety of the graphic novel portion of V-Wars. So the reason I initially picked this story up was because of the name on the cover. I have been someone that's followed Jonathan Maberry on social media for quite some years now, but I've still never read any of his stories, which is just ridiculous because I've heard so many great things about him as a writer, and so I've always intended to. I think I own a few books of his, or a couple books of his, and so I figured with seeing his name, I would give this one a shot. The premise sounded interesting, and I wanted a reason to read Maberry, so I figured this would be a quick and easy way to do that, so I decided to give this one a purchase. And then it sat for, I don't even know, 2 years? 3 years, maybe? It sat for quite some time. And it wasn't until recently, I think a few months ago now, my wife actually started watching, they turned this into a Netflix original series. And so she started watching that because it had the, what's his name? Ian Somerhalder, I believe his name is, the main character from Vampire Diaries, which she's obsessed with. And so she gave this one a shot. She loved it, like always talks about it. And so because she'd been talking about it so much, I figured, you know, I'd like to watch that, but I'd really prefer to read the graphic novel first, just so I have an idea of what it stems from. You know me, I love reading, I love the reading aspect of it first before going into it, at least nowadays. If I can read the source material first, I will definitely try to do that. And with this being such a short run of a graphic novel, only 11 issues in total, I figured this would be pretty easy to get through. So I own Volume 1, and so I decided this month would be a great month to finally dive into this and give it a shot. So I will say right up front, I will be giving a spoiler-free review of Volume 1 here. I will, and I guess I should also preface that by saying I will talk about what's on the back of the book. So if you find that to be a spoiler, then there might be some spoilers for you. As someone who does his damnedest to avoid any and all spoilers that I can, I wouldn't consider this a spoiler, so that's why I'm saying that it is spoiler-free, but obviously, spoilers are incredibly objective. So I was just reading on Twitter earlier today, somebody complained to a person I follow on YouTube that they spoiled the music in a video game for them. Like, it's just, I don't know, I just find that so ridiculous. But anyway, so spoilers are subjective. So to me, it's spoiler-free, but just keep that in mind. So anyway, I don't think I mentioned, but this graphic novel was released in 2014, so I should say that up front too. So, all right, with all that out of the way, the question is, what did I think of V-Wars Volume 1? So, without further ado, let's dive right in. So really, at its core, V-Wars is basically what it sounds like. It is a war story with a vampire gift wrap on it, essentially. So we follow the main character, who is this gentleman here. His name is Luther Swan, PhD. So Luther has a doctorate in folklore. And so... This is so ridiculous, but because of that, he's basically considered the world's most renowned person on vampires, I guess. He's considered to know the most about vampire history and vampire lore. And so because we are at a spot now, we pick up, it says like 212 days into the vampire war. So it's about 7 months, give or take, somewhere around there. And so at this point, he's considered the one that knows the most. So 7 months ago, Luther was a professor. He was teaching classes at a university. And now, over the course of the past 7 months, he has eventually moved into becoming an advisor to the president of the United States. So that's how much he knows about vampires. He is the chosen one when it comes to that. So we follow his story most closely. That's really who our main characters who we're following throughout this. And in the prologue, as we find out, he's actually teamed up with this group called V8. And they are like the most renowned vampire killers. Like, they are known for how many vampires they've killed over the years. This is really difficult for Luther because he's a liberal. He is someone who's anti-violence and someone who doesn't want to be a part of this war. But given his station in life and what happens to him in the prologue, which I'm not going to spoil, but something happens in his prologue that kind of kicks off his whole story. And so because of that, he's forced to make some decisions that he's very uncomfortable with. And so we follow that story as it progresses. This whole thing began because of what they're calling the ice virus. And this is so this virus was incredibly old, and it was, I guess, trapped in the ice caps. And as those started melting, so you kind of get somewhat of an idea. We talk about our liberal main character. We talk about, obviously, climate change is a part of this. So very small. That's really the only talk of climate change in this that I recall anyway, is how this disease kicked off. Anyway, the polar ice caps are melting, and so eventually it starts infecting people, and it's interacting with something that they call junk DNA in the novel here. It is DNA that we didn't even realize we had, or they didn't realize that people had. And so different people react to it differently, but it is turning some people into vampires. Though this is V-War, so obviously this is the war aspect of it is front and center. There's actually only a small number of vampires that are violent. But apparently it's enough that it has caused a massive war. So, take that for what it is. When we pick up with the story, we are, like I said, about 7 months in. We're following our main character, who is now the advisor to the president. And as it mentions on the back of the book here, so spoiler if you don't want to know that, but the Speaker of the House is assassinated right in public. He's giving a speech and he's assassinated. And a vampire terrorist cell, so another very strong indication of the type of story you're getting here. But the vampire terrorist cell takes credit for it. And so that's what really kind of sparks this V-War to, go to the next level, I guess would be the best way of saying it. And that's kind of the story that we're following throughout at least issues 2 through 5 in this story. I probably didn't give the best explanation of the story, and it might sound like it's a very simple idea, which I get, I could argue it is a simple premise, but Mabry does so much more with it. He makes this a lot deeper than I ever would have expected. He really tackles the gray areas of human nature and, in this instance, vampire nature. We get more than just good guys and bad guys. There's no one in this story. Well, there are, but there are few people that matter that are either purely good or pure evil. It's very much in the middle. Mabry reminds you that there are evil people on both sides of the spectrum, and just because someone disagrees with your ideological beliefs, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are evil or that they're the enemy. And I think Mabry handles that in such an intelligent way here that was much more than I anticipated going in. Our main character, of course, he is very clearly on one side of the political spectrum that's built here, but he spends a lot of time with this V8 unit that I was talking about, and they are very clearly on the opposite side of that spectrum. And specifically him and the leader of the V8, they have some conversation about it, and it's interesting. It's not done in a way that is meant to downplay one side or the other, or degrade one side or the other. They're both fighting for what they believe in. They just have very different ideas of what's right and what's wrong, or different ideas of the end game, I guess. And so I thought that was really interesting. And again, just something that I think Mabry, it's very clear the talent that Mabry has as a writer, even if, this actually does have quite a lot of text in it, quite a lot of dialogue in it, more so than a lot of graphic novels I read. But it never slowed down. It was never bogged down with that. It always helped drive the plot forward and always introduced something interesting and something unique as the story continued to move forward, which is really a great sign of excellent writing. Another aspect of this that I really liked is the art style, which frankly, this is not my favorite type of art style. And looking at it before I read it, I didn't think I would really like it, but they do such a good job with it. And they're not afraid to show the gory bits, which is always fun in a graphic novel. So even though this isn't my favorite art style in the world, I think it fits this story very well. It is so cool to see all the different characters they come up with. And another aspect I loved was the fact that these vampires are, it's not just this vampire that you see on the cover. There are so many different types of vampires in this, different species, I guess, of vampires. Here's a great example. Like we have, kind of the more standard vampire that we think of. And then we have this like devil looking satanic vampire. And then we have all the way to like the Nosferatu vampire. So I think just the different vampires that they have is really cool. And even more so than like the drawing, they all have, or not all of them, but the different species all have unique characteristics, unique traits about them that, they might be killed in a different way. They might, hunger after different things. Some are almost like zombies. It's really interesting. In just 5 issues, the amount of differences that he finds, that Mabry is able to find in these vampires, in this species of vampire that he creates. It's really cool. Really, though, what surprised me the most about V-Wars, and I keep going back to it, but it was just how much there was to sink my teeth into. And you better believe that pun was absolutely intended. But there are terrorist cells, there's espionage, there's civil war, there's vampires, of course, and just so much killing and brutality. And it's just, there's so much here that, I don't know, like, if you enjoy any of those things, you'll probably enjoy what V-Wars has to offer. What's arguably best of all is that this is a shockingly relevant read today, 6 years after it was published. So because of that, and because of all the other things I mentioned, I am giving V-Wars Volume 1, Crimson Queen, written by Jonathan Mabry, 4 out of 5 stars. All right, so that's going to do it for my graphic novel review of V-Wars Volume 1. And I recently just discovered that Volume 2 is actually available digitally to borrow from Hoopla, thanks to my library. So I'm definitely planning on checking it out there. I want to purchase it, but it's a little bit pricier than I was hoping. It's not available through Amazon. It's through the Amazon Marketplace. So you have to pay like $14 for the book and then another 4 or 5 for shipping or whatever it is. So I'll just go with it digitally for now. And then if I can find it used in a comic book store later on, I'll probably pick it up if I enjoyed it. And also, there's actually at the back of this book, it lists, as I drop it, there is V-Wars short story. This is Blood and Fire. I believe this is the second prose novel. So it says prose novel. It is a prose novel, but it's a short story collection. And they have 4 of those. And with how much I loved this world that Mabry's created, I definitely want to check those out. So I have the first one in my Amazon cart. I plan on purchasing it when I actually do a purchase sometime soon here. So I really want to see how that one holds up compared to the graphic novel series. But if you do get interested in this world, you have the graphic novel, you have the short story anthologies, you have the Netflix original series. So there is this whole V-Wars universe that you can, dive into and have fun with. So I'm excited about jumping into more of it just because I enjoyed this one so much. So have you guys read any of the V-Wars universe? Have you watched the Netflix original show? If so, let me know down in the comments below what you thought of it. If not, do you want to check it out now after watching this review? I'd love to hear about that too down in the comments below. So please put those comments down there. I'd love to have more of a conversation with you guys down there. As always, if you guys did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to Cinefessions here on YouTube. And if not, thank you anyway for watching. I really appreciate it. All right, guys, so that's going to do it for tonight. I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.